Hey everyone, it's Anime Reaper coming at you with another What If Naruto Found Uzumaki Library, Part 7. This fanfiction was written by S. Targon. If you like this what if and want more like it, please like and subscribe to my channel and don't forget to check the description and leave a comment down below. Without further ado, let's get started. Chapter 7, First Blood. Chapter 7. Because they were to patrol a couple of miles within the border, Team 8 was required to set up their own camp well back from the boundary with the land of Earth. Kurane merely shook her head when their first patrol discovered the subtle traces of Daraketsu's camp. They had claimed a small clearing within sight of the actual border. Naruto supposed the Hokage had been right, those bakas were spoiling for a fight if they did that. Naruto tried to pay close attention to how Kurane-sensei had them do things, because there was almost always a reason behind it, like the way they randomly varied their patrol patterns to make it harder for someone to slip by them undetected. It was embarrassing, but sometimes he did have to ask her why. At least she didn't berate him for being stupid when she answered his questions. Instead, she seemed pleased that he wanted to know. Not knowing why she did this began to bother him until he finally had to ask her about that as well. Some instinct made him wait until Hinata and Shino were sparring after dinner, because he wasn't sure what the answer would be. Kurane kept her eyes on her students as they fought. Running the patrols was helping their speed and endurance, but she said she still wanted them to train a little when they took breaks. If their bodies were too tired, she would go into what Naruto recognized as her lecture mode and talk to them about things they needed to know. Those were usually interesting, but it was another time when she also welcomed questions. Why was this so? Ano, sensei, Naruto said in a low voice as Hinata slapped aside Shino's punch and made a strike toward his midsection that forced him to quickly backpedal. She still wore the weights, but they were slowing her down less and less. He wondered if she even noticed this. What is it, Naruto? Kurane replied. I've been asking a lot of questions lately, he said, but his voice trailed off. How could he say this without sounding like a baka? Yes, she said, her eyes still on the combatants. I'm glad you've been taking a more active role in learning strategy and tactics. But that's just it, Naruto said, the words tumbling out easier now. Why are you so happy that I'm asking all these questions? Almost all the teachers at the academy got mad when I asked questions. Everyone but Iruka, she asked softly. Shino used his greater reach to force Hinata to retreat again. Naruto shrugged. Iruka's different. He grew up without parents like I did, so he cuts me a break. No, Kurane said firmly, he's not. He's doing his job properly. Evidently, he's one of the few instructors that is. Nani? Naruto asked, his eyebrows drawn together in confusion. Kurane sighed. Naruto, why do you ask those questions? Are you seeking attention? Are you trying to delay me so I don't start talking about a new subject? Or are you simply trying to irritate me? No, sensei. Naruto said quickly, I just asked because I wanted to know. Exactly, Kurane murmured as Hinata leapt over Shino's leg sweep. A student that actually wants to learn is a blessing to a teacher. Why should I want to discourage that? But, why didn't the instructors want? Naruto's voice trailed off. It's because of me, isn't it? He asked coldly. Not precisely, Kurane said in a voice little more than a whisper. Naruto, I'm not going to excuse their behavior, but I think it might help you to understand. When the Kyuubi attacked, it was like a natural disaster. It was unstoppable. I was miles away from the battle and I could still feel it. More chakra and killing intent than I'd ever imagined was possible to exist. I'd never been more afraid in my life, and I imagine that was true for everyone else in Konoha. Then it was defeated, but at the cost of the Yondame's life. It's hard to explain how much we all loved the fourth Hokage, but I think any one of us would have given their lives in his place, were it possible. But then he was gone, and so was the demon responsible for his death. Everyone was angry and grieving for the Hokage and everyone else who'd died, and there was no real outlet for that grief and rage. I know the third and fourth Hokages wanted you to be seen as the savior of the village, but I don't think it was possible, not with everyone still full of rage. Especially since there was really only one obvious outlet for that rage. Me, Naruto finished her sentence dully. After another quick exchange of blows, Hinata and Shino sprang apart, panting. It's hard to break an ingrained habit, Kurane said, slipping into her lecture mode for a moment, but once someone does manage to see the real Naruto, they don't go back to seeing you as a demon, do they? No, they don't, Naruto said with a sigh. But I was at the academy for years, and it seems like Iruka is the only one that bothered. All of the other instructors were just trying to get back at my prisoner by making me feel stupid. As I said, I will not excuse their behavior, Kurane agreed, but I also know that Iruka really does care about you. When he heard about the spy, he thought I'd ordered you to fight, until I explained, he looked like he wanted to kill me. Naruto was mortified that Iruka almost attacked another shinobi because of him, especially a jonin. Oddly enough, he also felt a strange warmth to know that the man cared about him that much. Jigomen, he choked out, apologizing. No need for apologies, Kurane said. I'm glad to see the truth of his feelings. We had a very productive conversation, and I think I may be able to call him a friend in the future. But do you realize why my attitude toward questions may be somewhat at odds with what you have previously experienced? Naruto looked puzzled for a moment and then nodded. Because the others wanted me to stay ignorant and fail as a ninja, that was the only means they could see for getting even with the Kyuubi. That is an accurate summation, Kurane said as Hinata landed a solid hit on Shino's shoulder, making him stumble backwards. Understanding and teasing apart the motivations of others, based upon indirect observations, is a valuable skill to cultivate for a shinobi. Even more so for a Hokage. Everything is a lesson with you, isn't it? Naruto asked, half-jokingly. Of course, Kurane replied softly as she stood up. We have a lot of ground to make up, and I am responsible for your education now. Naruto blinked as he absorbed that statement. He barely listened as Kurane gave a detailed critique of the sparring match they'd just watched together. Oh. Things were quiet, at least at first. When Kurane was satisfied that their stamina and chakra reserves were up to the task, they began following their patrol routes through the tree cover rather than on the ground. After mastering the water walking exercises, using chakra to keep their footing on tree branches was easy. Before the day was over, they were leaping from tree to tree, subtly boosting their leg strength with small amounts of chakra to improve their leaping distance. Even with his weights, Naruto could make a 20-meter jump from a standing start, without really straining himself. He did, however, make sure he aimed for branches that were sturdy enough to handle his extra weight. Getting dumped on his head once was enough. While this method was faster, Kurane cautioned them to not use it in hostile territory, or when they feared they would be ambushed. It was damned hard to dodge a thrown kunai when you were in mid-leap, and landing on an explosive tag can ruin your whole day. With a little subtle begging, Naruto also persuaded Kurane to show them some more jutsus. It had been embarrassing to admit it at first, but she also showed him why he had so many problems using the body substitution technique, Kawarami no Jutsu. It worked sometimes, like when he ambushed Sasuke team, but it failed more often than not. As he suspected, he'd been throwing far too much chakra into the technique, which surprised him at first. He thought moving your body in the blink of an eye, and replacing it with a nearby object would take a lot of energy. Kurane-sensei merely shook her head and explained that if the common shinobi technique required as much chakra as he used, it would kill anyone weaker than a jonin who tried it. It was a little disturbing to realize just how much more chakra he had available than other, normal ninjas. Of course, as Kurane pointed out, as bad as his chakra control was, he wasted so much that it wasn't that obvious. But in the same breath she promised to work with him until he was as efficient as she was. Naruto couldn't wait, he wanted to show everyone that he wasn't just empty boasts. Kurane's repertoire of ninjutsu seemed somewhat eclectic. She seemed to know techniques from a variety of styles. Sensei reiterated her motto of, "There is no such thing as useless knowledge," when Shino asked her about it as she introduced them to a Doton jutsu. Doton, Wana, let one mold chakra to influence the ground around their target. It required you to touch the ground as you released the molded chakra. But making the earth flow up around the target's feet, slowing them down or trapping them, was really useful if used correctly. This jutsu was especially tricky for Naruto, because if he molded too much chakra into the technique, the ground would liquefy around Kurane's feet, letting her merely step out of it. Fortunately, all the practice he'd had getting Sutten, Gyushuyu under control paid off here, and he mastered it almost as soon as Shino and Hinata. He was a little puzzled when he finally got it right. Hinata was trying to apologize for something, but when he asked her what she did wrong, she wouldn't tell him. Remembering Kurane's words, he just shrugged and smiled at her. Whatever you did, I'm not mad at you. You're a good person, Hinata, so I know you'd never do something to be mean. For some reason, she spun around and quickly walked away. Naruto turned to Shino with a questioning expression, but the bug user wouldn't say anything. Again, Naruto had the oddest feeling that Shino was smirking at him. He hoped Kurane introduced a cat on jutsu next, so he could accidentally burn the collar off of Shino's jacket. Oh. On the second week of the patrol, Hinata's Byakugan caught traces of swift movement at the edges of her range. They changed courses to track what had to be a shinobi and followed it all the way back to the border. As quick as they were, it still crossed back over the border before they could catch it, and Kurane called a halt when they were still several meters short of the invisible boundary. Naruto noticed they were standing near the clearing that Daraketsu's team had used as a campsite. At the other end of the clearing, on the earth side of the border, were 4 figures that seemed to be around Kurane's height. Naruto wondered which one had violated their border to lead them here. He looked left and right, his nostrils flaring, wary of an ambush. Hinata's Byakugan were active, and some slight motion in the grass around Shino's feet meant his bugs were deploying as well. A few seemed to have taken to the air after moving well away from their host. Have we satisfied your curiosity? Kurane called out. Somewhat, the largest of the 4 rock ninjas replied. They were all dressed in tans and neutral grays, and the lower portions of their faces were covered as well. I'm somewhat insulted that Konoha sends a group of children to match us. We are not here to contest with you, Kurane said firmly. The Hokage does not want any more incidents along this border. Daraketsu was recalled for that reason. That's too bad, the rock leader yelled back with an evil laugh. He was fun to bait, if a bit too predictable. Naruto didn't really want to draw attention to himself, but he'd become rather warm during the extended chase through the trees. He slowly unzipped his heavy jacket so the cool morning air could cool him down. As slight as that motion was, it still drew the attention of the rock shinobi. Naruto froze as he felt sudden spikes of killing intent, radiating from across the clearing. His ears strained to catch the whispered words exchanged between the IWA ninjas, but he could barely make out a few, such as bastard, flash, and yellow. It really didn't make a lot of sense to him, but he froze in place, not wanting to provoke anything more until Kurane said the word. I see your mission is not as innocent as I would have believed, the rock leader called out as they split up and disappeared into the trees. You will not catch us unaware when you come for our blood. Back into the trees, Kurane hissed. Naruto waited until Shino and Hinata were halfway there before he began backing out of the clearing. His senses seemed extraordinarily sharp, and he could almost hear the individual blades of grass flex under his sandals. As he slipped through the trees, Kurane caught his eye. Her frown faded as he quickly glanced at Shino and Hinata, verifying their positions. She nodded and motioned for them to follow her. As previously arranged, Hinata sped up until she was even with Kurane. Her Byakugan was active and checked their path for ambushes or traps. Shino trailed behind them, and Naruto was a little farther back. If any of his team were attacked, he was in a position to see it immediately and counter-attack. If he was targeted, Hinata's all-around vision would let them know as well. Kurane-sensei led them on a circuitous route, doubling back many times to check for pursuers. Nothing more dangerous than a frightened deer was found, so eventually they returned to their camp. Ayano, sensei, Hinata said as soon as they stopped. What happened back there? I'm not completely sure, Kurane said, frowning. Their sudden aggressiveness is worrying, Shino said gravely. Naruto could only nod in agreement. I could read their lips, a little, through their masks, Hinata said, blushing. What does yellow flash mean? Kurane stiffened at Hinata's words, and then she turned and peered closely at Naruto. I suppose, if they saw him at a distance, and no real clues for gauging his height. She murmured. She let out a sigh as all 3 of her genins frowned at her in confusion. All right, I think I know what that was, the Jonin said. You've all seen the carving of the 4th Hokage on the cliff overlooking Konoha, right? They nodded. Well, from a distance, Naruto bears a passing resemblance to the Yondaime, she continued. Did he have yellow hair like I do? Naruto interrupted. Yes, Kurane replied. And because of that, and a special jutsu of his, he was often known as the Yellow Flash of Konoha. But why would Naruto's resemblance to the 4th Hokage cause such a reaction? Shino asked before Naruto could Kurane took a deep breath and sat down on a log they'd moved near the fire pit. Well, as you know, there was a war between Konoha and the hidden village of Stone back before you were born. She paused for a moment while they all nodded. Before becoming the Hokage, the Yondaime was a jonin who fought in many battles. He was known for his clever plans and skillful leadership. It is suspected that the rock leaders knew of this and wanted to draw him out. Shinobi historians don't know for sure that the IWA ninjas specifically targeted his students, but we do know that one was killed, an Uchiha named Obito. Kurane paused, taking a deep breath. Whatever they hoped to accomplish by killing the fourth student, it did not succeed. After his remaining students returned to Konoha to recover, he returned to the battlefields and, well, by the end of the war, over half of the shinobi of Iwagakure had fallen to the Yellow Flash and the attacks he led. Naruto felt his mouth drop open in shock. That wasn't something they'd lectured about at the academy. He killed half of the whole village, he asked in shock. The shinobi, yes. We were at war, Kurane said gravely, and that's what happens in a war. Some people think the Sandaime is weak because he favors peace. I call them fools. Naruto shook his head. They can't really believe I'm the fourth Hokage, can they? I mean, that's crazy. Kurane shook her head. No, those scared people often believe irrational things. But they may think you were sent specifically to intimidate or provoke them. I don't think the Hokage anticipated this reaction when he assigned us this mission. Hopefully, they will be encouraged to stay on their own side of the border for now. If they do not, I will know, Shino added. They stood there long enough for at least one of my allies to climb onto each of them. Those were female Kikai bugs, so I will quickly know if they get within scent range of one of my sentries. Very good, Shino, Kurane said with a smile. While they initiated this encounter by crossing over into Fire Country territory, we have gained far more than they in the exchange. Naruto remembered Kurane's words and tried to stay optimistic as he gathered wood for the cook fire. The thought of the heroic Yondaime killing people made him feel ill, but Kurane was right, it was a war, and he supposed he didn't have much choice. And neither would he, if war broke out again. He wondered who those fools were that Kurane had talked about, and resolved to be a little nicer to the Hokage next time he saw the old man. The blonde-haired genin went about his chores, but he would think back on this conversation many times in the years to come. Oh. The first hint of trouble came from Hinata, whose head snapped around while they were on a routine patrol. Sensei, she hissed. Naruto, who was in the process of leaping toward the next tree, caught himself with one foot still touching bark, so he increased the chakra in that foot and awkwardly recoiled back onto the bough. Hinata was looking to the right of their current course. They are under a genjutsu, she said as she shook herself and suddenly launched forward. Naruto watched 4 dark objects drop toward the forest floor from where she'd been standing and knew she'd discarded her weights. Hinata! Kurane barked, reaching toward the Hyuga genin. Naruto wanted to follow, but he knew he needed to see what was going on. Naruto Meijutsu, chakra pulse, he growled as he hurriedly crammed chakra into his hara, and then practically hurled it in the direction Hinata had jumped. The recoil nearly blew him backward out of the tree, and the bough his feet were chakra glued to creaked alarmingly. But the ripple sped outwards, knocking a few leaves from the trees like a stiff breeze, and making several figures shimmer into view under a tree in the distance. 3 adult-sized shapes swam into view, 2 of them carrying large bundles. Naruto had no idea who these men were, or why Hinata was attacking them, but he wasn't going to let her go alone. He jumped after her, Shino and Kurane barely a step behind. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. Naruto called out, his hands forming the familiar seal sequence as he dropped toward the men. The 3 of them were joined by a score of clones. The man on the left dropped his cloth-wrapped burden and began making seals, his fingers a blur. Katon, Guren Dofai Nikosukachuyo, he snapped, and a trio of fireballs sprang from his fingertips. They spiraled outwards, leaving trails of fire that grew ever wider as they spread. Shino and Kurane avoided the worst of it, but the vortex of flames had been aimed directly at Naruto and his clones. Naruto threw his arms in front of his face at the last moment and tried to shift his chakra to protect his face. The heat that washed over him was intense, and he didn't need to hear the multiple pops to know his clones had been destroyed. When he broke through the funnel of fire, the cool air beyond was incredibly sweet. He dropped to the ground in a crouch as he spread his arms again. His face felt tight and hot, and the smell of scorched hair was unbelievably foul, but he was basically in one piece. Damn, Kuro, you're slipping, the largest of the strangers said. I thought you were going to cook that little bastard for dinner. He was tall and heavily muscled, and wore only loose pants and heavy boots. His shaved head shone in the sunlight that filtered through the trees, and his cold black eyes gleamed like chips of obsidian. The man on the right wore a blue and black uniform that contrasted with the fire user's red and black one. He was fending off Hinata with a staff made of gleaming ice, but was having some difficulty handling the weapon while trying to juggle the large bundle he was also burdened with. Finally, he growled in exasperation and threw his bundle into the air and swung the staff at Hinata crosswise with both hands. The staff was little more than a blur, but the Hyuga was even faster as she leapt upward, grabbing onto the bundle with both hands and swinging it onto her back as their combined momentum spun her into a tree trunk. Naruto gaped as her feet found purchase on the rough bark and she ran up the trunk in a continuous motion. She angled toward a large branch and began running along the underside of it without even slowing down. Damn it, we can't let them delay us. Kill them all, the large shinobi barked. An instant later, his hand flashed upward and deflected the kunai Kurane had thrown at his face. With pleasure, Taishao. Kuro snarled, his hands flashing through seals again. Katon, ka and how shaky no jutsu, he said in a blot of flame shot from his hands toward the still smoldering Naruto. Suten, gyushuya. Naruto snapped as he ran through the seals. It was a little tricky, trying to align the condensation vortex along a vertical plane instead of a horizontal one, but he didn't have to worry so much about holding back his chakra this time. A spinning chakra vortex a foot wide opened up and the air around them became parched of moisture as a blast of water erupted like a fire hose, intercepting the flame blast. Naruto looked away, blinking rapidly, as steam blasted across the battlefield. There was a loud grunt of pain that brought a fierce grin to his lips. He hadn't missed. A flash of motion drew his eyes to the side. When Hinata reached the end of the bow, she didn't even slow down and instead launched herself toward the ground. She twisted in midair so that she absorbed the impact with her legs, cradling the bundle as she sank into a low crouch. A kunai flashed and the fabric parted to reveal a young girl, bound and gagged, with furious white eyes like Hinata's. The other bundle is Kano Amuro-kun, Hinata said as she quickly cut her sister's bonds. Kurane's eyes widened and she turned toward the package Kuro had discarded, but Naruto was even faster. His fist snapped up and he struck himself a sharp blow on each shoulder, and then threw his arms forward. From under the sleeves of his jacket, his forearm weights flew forward and struck the large ninja in the face, staggering him backward. The discarded weights fell to the ground, where they embedded themselves in the soft forest loam. In a flash Naruto was running past the leader, whose fist made a crater in the ground inches behind him. Naruto silently thanked Guy and Lee as he grabbed the other bundle and slung it toward his sensei. Kurane caught it without missing a beat, her kunai already moving. Things were moving rapidly, too rapidly for him to keep track of. The guy with the ice staff was closing in to reclaim his prize, but Hinata stepped over her sister, leaving her a kunai to finish freeing her legs, and set herself in his path. The staff flashed forward, but this time she was ready, and shattered it with a Jyuken strike. A sharp shard left a line of blood along her cheek and Naruto bared his teeth in a feral snarl. A ball of chakra-enhanced fire struck him in the back, knocking him to his knees as it tried to ignite the tough jacket material. Naruto somersaulted forward, feeling blisters rise on the back of his neck. He raised himself into a handstand, looking behind him. Kuro was starting another set of hand seals, but a volley of kunai from Kurane made him abort that attack and leap backwards. Naruto saw the thrown knives embed themselves up to the rings in the earth and silently reminded himself never to get his sensei mad. He flexed his arms and launched himself into the air, marveling at how much easier this was with half of his weights gone. He struck the quick-release catches for the leg weights as he tumbled, and then snapped his legs out straight to launch them at the flame user. Kuro jumped backward to avoid those as well, hissing in frustration. But his annoyance was brought up short when a mass of Kikai bugs swarmed up his legs and Shino's right arm wrapped around his neck, laying a kunai across the front of his throat. The fire user's eyes widened and he froze in place. Good one, Shino. Naruto crowed, then turned back toward the big guy. The leader was moving to help the ice nin with Hinata. Hey team. I ain't done with you. Doton, wanna. He slapped the ground and the soil under the large man's feet writhed and flowed up over his boots. The largest ninja caught himself as he started to stumble. Then he turned toward Naruto and smiled. His skin took on a metallic sheen and his feet began to sink inches deeper into the ground. With a heave, he tore his feet free of the earth snare and began striding toward the much smaller green-clad shinobi. Naruto! No, a shrill voice yelled. Roughened as it was from the gag and whatever else he'd been through, Naruto could still recognize Kano Amaru's voice. Don't. He killed Iruka-sensei. Naruto froze in place. He couldn't move, could breathe. He didn't just hear that. He couldn't have. It was impossible. He felt the blood rushing in his ears as his fingers curled into claws. His blood was turning into fire in his veins as his mind shut down. He saw Hinata hesitate, jumping back from the ice user and turning toward him, her eyes wide. A quick jutsu from the blue-clad ninja launched a volley of ice shards at the Hyuga. Her Byakugan still active, Hinata avoided or blocked most of them, but the last one struck the side of her head. She dropped to the ground. Kurene's hands were a blur as she launched a volley of kunaus. The ice nin dodged and blocked, but still ended up with one jammed into his shoulder. Kurene charged at him, a blade in each hand. Get out of here. Run, she shouted at the children who were gingerly climbing to their feet. Kano Amaru grabbed the Hyuga girl's hand and they ran into the forest. Now, the leader said as he stomped toward Naruto, beginning to pick up speed. A sudden roar of flames from behind him made Naruto turn, even as he spun away from a fist that nearly flattened him as it drove into the ground. I don't need to use seals to do this one, boy. Kuro smirked as his body was wreathed in flames. There was a loud crackling sound as Shino's Kikai bugs were incinerated. Shino himself was blown backwards off his feet, his right arm a mass of flames. Naruto continued sidestepping, trying to keep both of the bastards in front of him, and lead them away from Shino and Hinata. The fire user didn't seem to be that interested in Shino, because he began flicking small fireballs at Naruto, making him jump to the side as they ignited the parched grass. Shino rolled over and over in the grass, eventually smothering the flames as he rolled away from the clearing. The right sleeve of his jacket was burned away, and what Naruto could see of his arm was a mass of red that didn't look good at all. Against all reason, Shino tried to struggle to his feet, holding himself up with his good hand. The ever-present sunglasses gone, the Abarame boy locked gazes with Naruto for a moment. Then his hazel eyes rolled back into his head, he slowly toppled forward and was still. Come on, the leader said. Cook this little brat and then we can triple team the Jonin and get out of here. I'd like to take my time with her and the girl, the flame-wreathed ninja leered, but it shall be as you command. Stand still, boy, and I'll make this quick. Naruto froze in place. The thought of these two hurting his sensei and Hinata finished a process that began with Kano Amaru's shout, and gathered momentum as he watched Hinata and Shino fall. He felt something snap inside. I'll kill you, he screamed and charged toward Kuro, whose eyes were suddenly wide. Everything seemed to be covered by a red haze, and Naruto vaguely realized that the Kyuubi's red chakra was exploding out of his skin. He wondered if this meant the seal was breaking, but he didn't really care as long as it meant he could stop them from hurting his friends. The fire user hurled fireball after fireball at the short ninja, who suddenly didn't seem so ridiculous an opponent. The pronounced whisker marks the boy could feel etching deeper into his face probably had something to do with that, along with the pronounced canines that were starting to draw blood from his lower lip. Naruto batted the flaming missiles aside with contempt, ignoring the sting in his palms that disappeared almost as soon as it registered. As he leapt onto him, Kuro finished a series of frantic seals. Katon, Okabai Shounatsujigoku, he screamed as flames exploded outward from his body. Naruto crashed through the flaming shockwave, feeling it as little more than a warm breeze through th. That all for What If Naruto Found Uzumaki Library, Part 7. If you like the story so far, please show your support by liking the video and subscribing to my channel, and show your support to the author by following the link down in the description. Thanks for listening, and until next time.